Hello everyone, Kaiben here. So recently one of my friends started playing Guild Wars 2 and is new to MMOs in general, and I thought while I was showing him the ropes I could make a few quick guides to let beginners know everything they need to about Guild Wars 2, and maybe even show some tips and tricks I picked up along the way to veterans. So since this is the first video, we will focus on the first thing you do in Guild Wars 2, and that's create a character. So when you open up the game for the first time, you'll need to select a world that you'll create your character on. So the world is the server that you will be playing with all your characters on, and it doesn't matter too much generally because Guild Wars 2 uses a mega server system which pools all the players from a region into the same maps. It does however matter for World vs. World, which is Guild Wars 2's large-scale player versus player, which pits 3 different servers against each other at a time. So whichever server you pick will be the server you're fighting for in World vs. World. But if you're not too concerned about that, then you can just choose whichever server your friends are on, or just pick one at random. So you also see the guest button here, which allows you to guest to a different server, which with the new mega server system doesn't really get a whole lot of use, so you don't have to worry about that. Or the transfer button, which allows you to transfer for a certain amount of gems, which are an in-game currency that you can buy either using gold or real-life cash. And that will allow you to change servers. So once you've gone ahead and selected your server, you'll create your first character. So you need to select an empty character slot, and then click Create. So your first choice here is to choose your race. Now race will determine which starting city you start with, and your personal story for the first few chapters, as well as your appearance. Races also have different racial skills, which are utility skills that are different for each race, and generally don't have too much of an impact because they are slightly weaker than most utility skills to keep the balance in between the races. But it does add a nice flavor to the character itself. So to help choose your race, apart from the appearance, there is a little flavor text down here when you select each one, and it kind of gives you an idea of what that race is about and kind of what their personal story might be like based on their attributes. So we're just going to go ahead and pick a human to start with. The second choice is your gender, which is just appearance in Guild Wars 2. It doesn't affect anything else. So go ahead and pick whichever one you want there. And then becomes one of the biggest decisions, is your class. So there are currently 8 professions in Guild Wars 2. There will be a 9th one released with the next expansion pack. There are 2 heavy armor professions, 3 medium armor professions, and 3 light armor professions in each row here. So in Guild Wars 2, your profession doesn't necessarily determine your role. Any class can be played in almost any role, although some are better at certain things than others. And Guild Wars 2 doesn't operate on a Holy Trinity system like others, based on tanking, DPS, and healing. So basically any class can be played in almost any role. With that in mind, you'll want to pick the class that seems like the most fun to you. So I'll go ahead and give a brief rundown of all the classes, and hopefully that'll help you make your decision. So to start off with some commonalities, almost every profession, except for Engineer and Elementalist, have the ability to weapon swap. This means you can equip 2 weapon sets and switch in between them during the battle with a short cooldown. Almost all professions, except for the Engineer again, has access to Signet abilities. So it's a kind of common type of ability that has a passive buff until activated. Then you get 1 lump effect when you activate it, and have to wait for a cooldown before the passive buff comes back, and you can activate it again. So we'll start off with Warriors. Warriors are masters of martial skills. They rely on speed, strength, toughness, and heavy armor to survive. They're versatile in combat and benefit from offensive and defensive abilities. Warriors inspire allies and demoralize enemies. So warriors are kind of what you'd expect from a frontline soldier. They've got a very in-your-face play style. With their heavy armor, they're very tough, but they're also very extremely mobile. They have powerful burst skills as their class mechanic, depending on which weapon they have equipped, and it's charged by adrenaline, which they build up over the course of a battle. The more adrenaline they have, the more powerful the burst skill is when they activate it. They also control enemies through their physical skills, using skills that knock enemies over and deal lots of damage. And they use shouts and banners to provide buffs to themselves and allies. Next is the Guardian, also a heavy armor class. Guardians specialize in protective and defensive magic. A deep sense of loyalty to their allies fuels their passion and power. They're also skilled with a variety of weapons, which they put to good use against their enemies. So they've also got a kind of in-your-face fighting style. They're very tough, and they're more support-oriented with good access to healing, and less mobile than the Warriors. Their special class mechanic are Virtues, which are similar to Signets, in which they provide buffs until they're activated. and when activated they provide a bonus to both themselves and their allies. They can kind of control an area through their use of wards, symbols, and consecrations, which also provide buffs to allies, along with their shouts. They can summon special spirit weapons, which are AIs that will fight with them, doing different things depending on which weapon they summon. And they have powerful elite tomes that can provide support and healing skills for a short period of time, replacing their weapon skills. So the first medium armor class is the Ranger. Rangers are proficient with a bow. They rely on a keen eye, a steady hand, and the power of nature to slay their targets. They are loyal pets, which Rangers tame and train to distract enemies while the Rangers strike safely from a distance. So Rangers are kind of what you'd expect from a typical Ranger class. They've got a very ambush playstyle. They use range, mobility, and pets to stay alive, and these pets are their special class mechanic. So you have a stable of pets to choose from and equip 2 at a time. And you can swap in between the pets with a short cooldown, so if you want to swap out for their abilities, or if your pet is low on health, you can switch them out. You can kind of control the pet's position using a attacking of the enemy skill, or a recall to you skill. And the pets also have a unique skill for each pet that gives you a buff or harms the enemy when you activate it. You can also control pets with shouts, which give them a short buff and give them an order. Rangers also have access to traps, which they can set on the ground and lure enemies through to cause powerful effects. And they can also summon spirits, which are AIs that usually stay in place but can be traded to move, and these provide buffs for themselves and allies. The next medium armor profession is the Thief. Thieves are adept at the art of stealth. They utilize surprise and shadow to get close to their enemies, and they're deadly in one-on-one combat. They have an affinity for setting up traps and going where they were never meant to. So thieves are kind of your typical rogue class. They excel at single target damage and rely on stealth and evasion to survive. They're also extremely mobile. Their special class mechanic is a steal, which allows them to take a skill from an enemy, which doesn't actually remove the skill from the enemy, but it does give the thief a special skill depending on the target they stole from. They have weapon skills, which are based on initiative instead of cooldowns, so they have a pool of initiative, and they can keep using skills as much as they want, as long as they have initiative in that pool. So this gives them a sort of unique play style, and allows them to use whichever skill they need at the time, rather than which ones are on cooldown. So if these have a lot of access to stealth, they can give it to allies, which is a huge support bonus. And they can also use it to disengage and re-engage during combat to a place that better suits them. So when they drop their stealth in a special opening attack, they can do a special effect, depending on which weapon they have equipped. For example, the bow will immobilize their target, and if they're behind a target with their daggers, it will do a lot more damage. They also have access to Shadow Step abilities, which allow them to teleport instantly to the target, again allowing them to engage on their own terms. And they have traps, similar to the Ranger, and special venoms that when applied to their weapon, will give their next few attacks special effects. And the last medium armor class is the Engineer. Engineers are technological and alchemical masterminds. They employ turrets, grenades, elixirs, and a variety of other impressive devices and concoctions to overcome their enemies. So engineers kind of excel at area control. They have a very large bag of tricks, so though they only have access to a few different weapons, their class mechanic, the tool belt, gives them extra skills based on what they have equipped in their utility bar. And they have special kit skills, which will swap out their weapon bar for a new set of skills. So those kind of act like extra weapons. Engineers also have elixirs, which can give themselves bonuses, and the elixir's tool belt options are usually allow them to share that elixir with their allies. They also have turrets, which are AIs that will sit there and shoot at the nearest enemy, and these turrets can lock down an area quite effectively. So next is the light armor classes, starting with a Necromancer. Necromancers are masters of dark arts. They summon the dead to fight for them, channel blood energy, and rend their enemies' souls. Necromancers draw life force and use it to strengthen or heal themselves and others. So Necromancers are a very control-style class. They use conditions and fear. They can survive with their alternative health pool that they get from the Death Shroud ability. This is their special class mechanic, and it's powered by life force, which they gain from creatures dying around them or special skills. They have another set of spectral skills that can kind of manipulate this life force and give them additional health. They can summon undead minions, which, unlike Guild Wars 1, do not require a corpse to summon, and these AIs will just kind of run around and attack your targets with you. They can lay down special pulsing wells that heal allies and harm enemies. So the next light armor class is the Elementalist. Elementalists have harnessed Tiria's natural forces. Their powers of destruction are drawn from an affinity with the 4 elements that make up the world. They conjure air, fire, earth, or water to assault their enemies. So Elementalists tend to be kind of jack-of-all-trade type characters, although they have a lot of access to area of effect skills. They're extremely squishy, having the lowest base armor in the game, but they make up for it with their mobility and defensive skills. Their special class mechanic is their attunements. So what this allows them to do is swap between the 4 different elements, and this will change up their skill bar depending on what weapon they have equipped, giving them access to 20 skills per weapon rather than just the 5 normal classes have, but again, they don't have their weapon swap ability. And each element is kind of themed. So fire will give you a lot of area of effect type damage. Air is focused on more on damage and control. Water is focused on healing, and earth gives you protection and control abilities. They also have special glyph skills, which have a different effect depending on which attunement they're in at the time. And they have the camp trips, which are the defensive skills that allow them to instant cast these defensive spells that will get them out of danger when they need it, and can even be used in the middle of another action. They can buff their team with defensive auras, or they can summon powerful conjured weapons for themselves and allies. They replace their weapon skills for a short period of time, or until the charges are used up. The final light armor class is the Mesmer. So Mesmers are maestros of mirage. They weave mental magic that confounds, controls, or evokes emotion in their enemies. With a wave of the hand, they can shatter their own illusions to produce even greater special effects. So Mesmers tend to be more of like a duelist style class. They often focus on single targets, but don't always. And they rely on deception to stay alive. They can summon and shatter these special illusions, and that's their special class mechanic. So you can have up to 3 available at a time, and each illusion will target a single enemy. And when you shatter them, it destroys all of the illusions at once to provide either damage, confuse the enemy, daze the enemy, or provide a shortened vulnerability for the Mesmer. So the illusions come in 2 varieties. There are clones and phantasms. Clones look like the Mesmer, so you can't really tell if it's the Mesmer or not, depending on how the Mesmer is acting at the time, and usually are good enough to fool the AIs. And phantasms, which are clearly illusions, but often have powerful abilities. So they can support their team through special glamours that provide buffs to allies and harm enemies, or provide useful utilities like the ability to transport allies large distances instantly. Manipulations allow them to control the battle by moving conditions and boons around, or allowing the Mesmer to teleport. And they even have an elite skill that turns the enemy into a Moa. So how awesome is that? You get to watch them run around as a giant chicken for a little while. So that pretty much covers the classes, and I hope you found something that helps you make your decision here. And once you've chosen your profession, you can move on to the next step. So we'll just go ahead and grab a warrior here and move on. And the next step is to customize your character. So you've got a few options. You can zoom in to check out the face, you can hide the armor, and you can change the lighting, which allows you to see how it'll look in certain lighting conditions. You can change the height up and down for your character's race. You have a maximum and minimum height depending on your character's race. So a maximum height Norn can be truly gigantic, and a minimum height Asura can be exceedingly small. So then you can change your character's physique, skin color, all the head options. These are the default faces, and then once you're done with that, you can play around with all the details here. Change those up as much as you want. You have the hairstyles and the facial hair. So a few of these options won't be available at the initial character creation, and you'll have to get an item in-game from either the gem store or from an achievement reward or something. But you can also buy the gem store items with gold in-game, so you do not have to spend real money on that. Then you have your starting armor dies, so this will change once you get better armor and upgrade it and equip new stuff, but this will give you a starting appearance here. So once you have your character all customized just the way you like it, you can move on to the next section. So this first option here will give you the option to choose a piece of armor to start with. That's all it really affects. So just go ahead and pick whichever one you think looks the best. Then you will say that my trouble may follow me, but I use my charm, dignity, or ferocity to overcome it. So this is kind of just a role-playing style thing. It doesn't really have much effect, but it is kind of interesting to give your character a bit of character. So we'll say that our warrior overcomes everything with dignity. So this is where the choices start making big changes again. So this decision will determine what the first chapter of your personal story is. So you can say I was raised in the streets, I was raised by common folk, or among the nobility. And obviously this choice is different for every race because they have a different starting city and a different personal quest at this point. So we'll go ahead and say that our warrior was raised by common folk. Next you'll choose the second chapter of your personal story. And for humans, you can say, I've never searched for my true parents, I never recovered my sister's body, or I passed up the opportunity to perform in a circus. That sounds like a lot of fun, so let's try that one. Now this again is a kind of a role-playing decision almost. It just gives your character a bit more flavor. Everyone said I was blessed by, and then you can choose one of the 6 human gods if you're a human. So we'll say our warrior was blessed by Balthazar, the god of war, fire, and challenge. So he seems like a good patron god for a warrior. So a couple things to note here though is that for the char, once you've picked your attribute here, the first one will be your legion. So that will affect the first part of your personal story. And then you will pick a partner here. And this will be an AI that kind of accompanies you through your personal story as part of your war band. And then we'll go on to the next selection, and this one will be the second chapter of your personal story. Then you'll just need to come up with a unique character name. So once you've done that, you can start your quest. And this will launch into a short cutscene. It kind of gives you the background of your race and what's going on in the world. And once you're done with that, you can just skip it if you've already seen it. You will load into the tutorial. So once you're in the tutorial, if you got a special digital edition, you will receive your first items in the mail here. So you go ahead and take those. And you can equip that Hero's Band right away if you got one of those. And you'll have access to the Golem Banker, and if you've linked your account to Guild Wars 1, you will have a Hall of Monuments Portal Stone, which will send you there to receive your rewards. So now in the tutorial, you'll start off with just one skill with your first weapon. And you'll have that until you start leveling up and unlock the next ones. As you can see, you'll unlock the next skill slot at level 2, 4, 7, and 10. And then you'll start off with a healing skill here, which you can use to heal, or if you're a warrior, it is a signet, so it will give you that passive health regeneration, which will actually cover you quite well for quite a while. And then you'll start getting utility skills at level 13, 17, 19, and finally unlock your powerful elite skill at level 31. So to get you started, just talk to this guy and he will lead you through the tutorial. And then you can follow on the minimap where it will go, and it will show you which way to go. So I hope that gets everyone started. If you have any questions, or if you think I missed something, let me know in the comments. And I hope you found it helpful. Thanks for watching.